Okay. Well, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ross Orton. I'm the Deputy Head of Prep, and I'm taking a lead on this curriculum area in particular for pre-prep and prep. Thank you very much for attending. The purpose of this meeting is to share with you the research and thinking behind our approach to teaching RSHE, Relationships, Sex and Health Education, to give you an idea of the materials and the resources used for each year group, and to talk to you about your rights as parents as well, and carers. I would appreciate it if you could ensure that children are not listening into our meeting, because obviously we'll be discussing sensitive topics, so hopefully they could be out of earshot. This is only the first step in developing our resources in collaboration with our parent community. So I will try and be transparent and hopefully clear. This approach that I'll share with you does link to our PSHE policy here at school, as well as several other policies such as our child protection policy, our anti-bullying policy, and our PSHE policy as well. After this meeting, I will invite anybody who is interested to join a working party at DBS in collaboration with myself and other teachers, where these resources can be discussed and aligned with what we want for our children in the prep and the pre-prep. There will also be an opportunity at the end for any questions that you might have, and you're welcome to email me afterwards with any questions that you have too. Please don't be shy. Do come and find me and ask me or email me. So I'd like to start with a question for you. Casting your mind back, where and when did you learn about relationships, puberty, and human reproduction? Perhaps it was at school, but perhaps not. Or perhaps it was from a parent or an older brother or sister. Just cast your mind back and have a think about how you found your way to the information that you now have. I'd like to make the point that our heads, that the children's heads are not empty relating to sex and relationships. And they might well have some sort of awareness of a huge confusing topic. And perhaps they've learned things already from sources that we wish they wouldn't have seen. It would be better for them to receive accurate information given in an age-appropriate way before they hear misinformation or try to piece things together for themselves, which can make them frightened and confused. We've also got to take into account the considerations of the world around us today, which are very different from when I was being taught sex education. And if we're trying to keep our children safe, which is our fundamental, most important goal here at DBS, what do we need to consider? Well, we need to consider friends, family, school, the internet, television, social media, and other media as well. And we need to remember that our children's experiences are very different to our experiences when we were children. And there may be others not on this list, but I'm sure that most of you will agree that social media will play a huge part in our children's lives, with lots and lots of positives and lots of potential negatives as well. And you can see there the logos for sites like Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram, and I'm aware that there are others that will eventually come along and take their place, I'm sure. The other thing to think about too is music and lyrics. Have a look at these lyrics and see if you can guess the band. Just have a read of them for a second.
Taylor Swift?
Little Mix, actually, so, and apologies if that's not a very up-to-date reference. I'm trying to be current, but it's difficult. But it could easily be Taylor Swift or other performance, to be honest. And you can see that there are words in here that perhaps when you look at them in more detail are concerning that our young children would sing. And these lyrics, they pale into insignificance compared to other artists like Drake or grime artists. And actually, it's quite difficult to protect our children from hearing these lyrics. They're playing on our radio stations, and we might, as parents, we might enjoy that music. We can try to isolate our children from these lyrics and from the world around them, but actually, ultimately, we would fail. They have to engage in this world. And will our protection, could it ever be perfect? And we also need to remember that children talk to each other in the playground. So even if your child is isolated from all of this, they're still interacting with children who might not be. And in school and after school, it can be very difficult to protect them from hearing about some of these things, even if we don't let them view or hear it firsthand. So being informed is actually one of the best forms of protection that we can give our students. The world surrounds us with sexually orientated influences and media, so we need to equip our children to understand what they are seeing, to understand what healthy and positive relationships are, and how to keep themselves safe, and to recognize things that are problematic and sending the wrong messages. I'm sure that you are all aware of the potential dangers of being online, particularly for children. Bear with me 1 second, I'll just admit some more people. At school, from a young age, we train children up to keep themselves safe online. That's a really important thing that we do here at DBS, and to recognize when danger might be present. And this includes basic things like never sharing passwords, speaking to an adult, a trusted adult, if anything appears unusual or strange, and never revealing anything personal about themselves online. And actually, good relationship, sex, and health education is also part of this training. It's about keeping children safe. We are educating children for the real world with all its contradictions. When it comes to relationships, puberty, and human reproduction, our children's heads are probably not empty, but they may be full of myths and half-truths. We mustn't let our adult knowledge of relationships and sex, the negative things and the positive things that we might have experienced or be aware of, we mustn't let those things prevent us from seeing things from a child's perspective. And our focus should be on building healthy attitudes and positive relationships. It's not just about fighting off threats. There are many approaches to RSHE that have been used over the years. Can you tell from the picture which one I'm talking about? And you might even recognize the approach that was used on you. Because one option is to keep children in the dark, tell them nothing. And I would argue that this is not a very sensible option, given the world we live in and what's surrounding us and what children experience and hear about on a daily basis. More dangerously, it encourages children to look elsewhere for their answers. If you are a closed book, refusing to provide any information, children will find alternatives, which won't be as reliable or accurate as you could be. And the middle image is information overload, telling them everything, answering all their questions with as much factual information as you can, and just causing more confusion or perhaps fear. And some might use scare tactics too, focusing on the dangers and the negatives of relationships and sex. This might work for some young children for a while, but lots of the research that is coming out now says that it can encourage some children to take even more risks when they're older, whilst also creating a negative and unbalanced view of this fundamental part of our existence on the planet. I've been doing a bit of reading into research about sex education in Thailand, and I came across this document from UNICEF, the Review of Comprehensive Sexuality Education in Thailand from 2016, not so long ago. And just briefly to go through the findings, children are not taught, well, this is what the findings were coming up with in terms of the education that children have received in Thailand. They found that children had not been taught about the importance of gender, rights, and power, and that actually biological topics or the prevention of unwanted pregnancy of the thing that is given the most priority. However, a review of sexuality education programs in various countries has found that when gender and power related topics are taught, it does improve the effectiveness of the program, especially in terms of preventing unwanted pregnancies. And in this research, 80% of the programs that incorporated teaching about gender and power were effective in reducing unwanted pregnancies or sexually transmitted diseases, while only 17% of programs that did not include them were effective in bringing out these outcomes. And teaching about gender and power helps to cultivate students' critical thinking skills, which in turn improves their ability to analyze their own life situation, recognize their value, and empower them. Not covering these topics might help to explain why the rates of teenage pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases and HIV incidents have remained quite high among Thai youth. The Bureau of Reproductive Health in Thailand did aim to reduce the number of teenage mothers from 31.4% per thousand people to 25 by 2026, and that's an ongoing program at the moment. Is there a better way? One of the reasons that we use Jigsaw is that it uses the spiral curriculum approach. And what that means is that information is drip fed to children at the right age and stage in an appropriate way. And at DBS, we can provide a safe learning environment for all children to explore relationships, puberty, and sex education, and get high quality and accurate information in an informative and considered way. And first and foremost, this is done to safeguard children effectively. Information is factual and clear. And for this reason, what you will learn about today is that the correct names for body parts are used as they are drip fed into the curriculum. The children will use the correct anatomical names for their body parts. Children will also feel safe to ask questions and discuss their worries and issues. Their questions might be answered, or they might not be. Well, this would depend on the age of the child and the nature of the question, but the question would be valued. And children will have an opportunity to reflect on what a healthy, normal relationship looks like, and importantly, to know when that relationship is not healthy. And they'll be signposted to the correct places to find out more and be shown how they can get support from the right places should they need it. Looking briefly at the UK, because obviously our curriculum, we teach the British curriculum, new guidance did come into force, making relationships, sex education and health education a statutory part of the curriculum in British schools. It means that it has to be delivered by law. And the Jigsaw programme meets all those requirements that have been listed by the Department for Education. There is a differentiation made between the expectations in primary schools, which for DBS would be students up to year 6, and secondary schools, which is all students from year 7 upwards. It's important to note that from year 7 upwards, relationships education, sex education, and health education are considered to be statutory, meaning that there is no option for withdrawal from these lessons, just as there would not be an option for withdrawal from a maths lesson or an English lesson. It is considered part of the curriculum. Before year 7, so all of the EY1 all the way up to year 6, relationships and health education are compulsory. Sex education is not compulsory, but it is heavily recommended by the Department for Education. Relationships education is not only about intimate relationships, it's much wider than that. It also includes learning about families and friendships, how we treat and look after ourselves, the importance of community. We have different types of relationships with many people in our lives, those we work with, those we socialize with, those we might attend temple with or church or go running with, along with those we choose to be romantically involved with. So the relationships aspect is a very broad spectrum. And this part of RSHE encompasses all these different types of relationships. The Department of Education in the UK includes families and people who care for us within the topic of relationships, and ensures that schools help children to grow their understanding of what is a caring and respectful relationship. There is particular emphasis on online relationships and how children can keep themselves safe, both online and in the real world. The English government says, today's children and young people are growing up in an increasingly complex world and living their lives seamlessly on and offline. Children and young people need to know how to be safe and healthy and how to manage their academic, personal, and social lives in a positive way. Although we do not follow UK laws in Thailand, we follow Thai laws, the UK curriculum here has a foundation in many laws which influence its content. For example, the Equality Act of 2010, which we also use to base our own policies on. And it should be noted that this Equality Act includes the following statements. It says that others' families, either in school or in the wider world, sometimes look different from their family, but that they should respect those differences and know that other children's families are also characterized by love and care. They should know that stable, caring relationships, which may be of different types, are at the heart of happy families and are important for children's security as they grow up. And really importantly, the importance of respecting others, even when they are very different from them. For example, physically, in character, personality, or backgrounds, or make different choices, or have different preferences or beliefs. And there are similar themes in the Thailand Gender Equality Act of 2015. They're fundamental to our inclusive approach at DBS, where we welcome different types of families and we do not discriminate. Our aim is to teach children to be kind and respectful of different types of families, both here in school and when they are older and part of the global community. We also follow the Department for Education guidance when we undertake to be alert to sexism, misogyny, homophobia, and gender stereotypes, and to take positive action to build a culture where these are not tolerated. So we've looked a little bit about relationships. We're now turning to the health part of our RSHE. The following curriculum areas are considered statutory in the UK. Topics such as drugs, alcohol, and tobacco, and basic first aid are taught at appropriate ages. But mental well-being, internet safety, physical health and fitness, healthy eating, health in general, are all topics which are threaded throughout our RSHE learning from a very young age. What's important to understand is that lessons that talk about puberty, the changing adolescent body, are considered statutory at primary level because they have been included within the compulsory health education part. That is part of a child's health, knowing how they grow up and how their body is going to change. So you can see here the children will be learning the correct names for parts of the body, including genitalia. They will learn how their bodies will change during puberty, how to manage these changes, the practicalities that go along with these changes, why these changes need to happen, and really importantly, how and where to ask for help if needed. Sex education is discretionary at primary, but what exactly does the guidance say? It's not statutory, but it is recommended, heavily recommended. What this means for sex education is that currently parents do have the right to withdraw their children from the few lessons that focus on sex and conception, which is not as many lessons as you might think. I will show you a bit of that later. An important point to note, though, is that the UK's National Curriculum for Science contains lessons that also focus on reproduction within biology, such as plants and animals. And the science curriculum is statutory, and it's not possible to withdraw from that. So at DBS, using Jigsaw, we propose to define sex education as the part of the curriculum that focuses on human reproduction, sexual intercourse, conception, pregnancy, and birth. The sessions that explicitly focus on those. What I'll do now is I'll go through parts of the curriculum. I won't go into too much detail because it would take a good 3 or 4 hours. But what I can promise you is that nearer the time that these materials will be delivered, there will be meetings that are specific to each year group where you can review the resources in more detail and you can find out as much information as you need before you make your choices about the children's attendance in the lessons. But just briefly as an overview, is there any sex education in year 1 and year 2 science? Well, it doesn't include lessons on human reproduction, so there is no sex education in these years as we have defined it, but children do learn about their bodies, and what they start to think about is how lions have lion cubs, cats have kittens, and how all types of animals are replaced by smaller versions of themselves that grow into maturity. And they'll also start to think about how those beings need less and less care and support the older that they get. And they'll start to think about that relationship between child and the steps between child and an adult. In years 3 to 6, you can see that they start to look at a more developed range of themes. So they're describing the differences in the life cycles of mammals, amphibians, insects, and birds, looking at reproduction in plants and animals in general. They also look at describing changes as humans develop throughout their lives and learn about puberty. We believe children need accurate information on human reproduction at this stage in development to keep them safe, informed, and learning. And actually, this information needs to come from the right sources. We also need to make sure that we remove any stigma or negativity around the subject matter too. So the science curriculum must be taught by law in the UK primary schools, and relationships and health education must also be taught by law. And we interpret the science curriculum to include human reproduction. So following the 2020 law change, UK primary schools now teach lessons about puberty and body development. We also intend to deliver lessons in an age-appropriate way, in the same way to our prep children, and also an age-appropriate way to our pre-prep children. Obviously, they are not going to be talking about the changing adolescent body at all, but we are starting to sow the seeds for the education that will come later for them. Many schools in the UK, and following a British curriculum in international schools, currently choose to include age-appropriate lessons on conception and childbirth without any issue as part of their science curriculum. But can we really do that without explaining why our bodies change? It would be giving half the story. We also know that some girls will start their periods younger than we might have thought. So even in year 3 or 4, it's possible for girls to start their menstrual cycles. So we can't just rely on the science curriculum to equip them for this. We need something else that can be added to this to help them. And that is included in the statutory health education. The approach within the Department of Education and also within the Jigsaw program is based on analysis of safeguarding reviews, conversations with children and young people, and the research of professionals within this field. The conclusions drawn from all of these are that ignorance does not protect innocence. Not knowing about something doesn't mean that it won't happen. And worse still, can actually make children more vulnerable. And as I've already said, one of our fundamental aims is to keep children safe. So following the current UK model, where sex education is highly recommended but not statutory, parents will have the right to request that their child is withdrawn from lessons which focus on sex education within their relationship, sex, and health education. However, this is only likely to be 1 or 2 or 3 lessons in the course of a whole year. Withdrawal from lessons that focus on learning about relationships and health is not available to parents because we consider this to be a statutory part of our curriculum, an important thing for children to learn. And just to be clear as well, the lessons that do focus on sex will be delivered to children in the last half term of the year, term 3B. And before this time, I'll be holding further meetings to share resources with parents. For each year group, you can then make the decision about whether you want your children to be present for these lessons. My real hope is that as many children as possible will remain in these lessons. And the reason I'm sharing the resources with you today is so that the school can begin to gather an understanding about how the approach might need to be slightly tailored to make these lessons as effective as possible and decrease the number of withdrawals that parents might plan to make. So the resources I share with you now might look slightly different when they're shared again with parents close to the time, depending on the views of the members of the working party, including parents, which is formed after this meeting has taken place. So what, where, when, and how do we do this? Well, we've talked about the when, and I've mentioned already the use of Jigsaw, which I'm hoping that you're becoming more aware of as something that's happening in school. It's a mindful approach to PSHE, our personal, social, health, and economic education. And within that, the relationship, sex, and health education sit. Children have already started their Jigsaw lessons, so they're already learning about other aspects of their personal development. And they've been using Jigsaw so far with lots of success. Jigsaw is a whole school program, includes all the statutory requirements for relationships and health education, and includes the non-statutory aspect of sex education, where do babies come from, which is covered to an extent in science. But as we've seen, Jigsaw adds to it the information that is needed for children to continue their development in a safe and appropriate way. These are the units of study in Jigsaw PSHE. So you can see for the whole year, we have 6 big areas that we look at. Being Me in My World is our first puzzle piece that we've just finished, we'll be finishing next week. And then we'll be moving on to Celebrating Difference. And if you look down that list, you can see that the one in red, Changing Me, is predictably the one that will contain the sex education. Health education obviously will be covered mainly in the Healthy Me puzzle piece. And the relationships education is covered in the relationships puzzle piece, but to be honest, it's a big focus of all of our Jigsaw learning. How we interact with others, how we manage our relationships, keep them positive, how we cope when relationships are not feeling positive, when they're feeling negative. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start running just briefly for an overview all the way up from EY1 up to year 8, so you can see how this develops. Now, I promise that I won't read out every single thing on the slide, because I realize that will test your patience. But as I say, we'll be sharing the video afterwards, so if you don't get time to read everything on the slide, please do have a look at the video, and you can have a look at the lessons that come up for your children and your year groups. But really, I'll pick out some key things. So, for example, in the My Body lesson, the children are starting to learn the names for body parts. So they'll be learning about their legs and their eyes and their nose and their ears and their arms and their fingers. In EY2, that learning about body parts will continue, and they'll start learning about words like forehead, tongue, toes, and knees. And you can see there's a puzzle piece in there about growing up as well, which is about what it feels like to start taking on a bit more responsibility, trying to get ourselves dressed in the mornings, tidying our rooms, that kind of thing. Now, what happens in year 1 is that from now on, the curriculum is split into 2 areas. So what you'll see in purple as we look through this is the personal, social, health, and economic learning intentions. But you'll also see social and emotional development in green on the next slide too. So it will split in half from now on. And here you can see that children are starting to be introduced to the correct vocabulary for genitalia. It's introduced early so the school can meet its safeguarding obligations and get the children used to using the words appropriately. And we also teach them when it's appropriate to use the words and when not to use them too. Another rationale for this is that as children get older, body part words are not seen as something rude or shameful. They are just anatomically correct names for parts of the body. Another thing I wanted to share with you was that a lot of the safeguarding research that had focused on serious case studies where very tragic things had happened had picked up on a theme that more often than not, children who had been placed in a vulnerable situation, who had experienced sexual abuse, were using different names for their body parts. They were using pet names or cute names or made-up names. Now, what this meant was that when the child tried to disclose what was happening to them, they were often using confusing terms for their body parts that professionals were not aware of. And that meant that their disclosure was not understood and it was not taken seriously. So actually an important part of safeguarding is knowing that our children can name their body parts and that we can be confident that they could use that vocabulary to identify when something has made them feel uncomfortable so that action can be taken as quickly as possible. In year 1, there's a growing understanding of privacy that's encouraged as well. The fact that children don't share their bodies in the same way as they might have done when they were toddlers. In year 2, children start to learn properly about the anatomical differences between boys and girls, and they're still using the correct words. More safeguarding is included here as children learn about types of touch that they like, that they don't like. They're starting to understand who can touch them and where they can be touched and who cannot touch them and when permission should be sought. So, for example, that parents can touch their children. Doctors might touch children, but only in certain situations and with parents present, that kind of thing, so that children are being encouraged to take ownership of their bodies and to understand what their own personal space is and the personal space of others too. Now in year 3, children make links between other animals and start to understand how babies grow. But they also begin to understand that bodies need to change for human beings to do this. And importantly, there is a focus on stereotypes, hoping that children will grow up accepting that girls and boys can choose any roles in society, can do any jobs, and that there are not specific roles for girls or specific roles for boys, or even specific clothes for girls and boys. Puberty is introduced very gently in year 3 because some girls might start their periods early during year 3, and it's necessary to prepare them for this so that they aren't scared or worried. Year 4 children learn about labeling internal and external parts of female and male bodies, and they learn about menstruation. As we've said, it's perfectly possible that a year 4 girl might already be experiencing this in reality. To help with the teaching of this, in year 4, we start to share videos which are teaching resources to demonstrate how the female reproductive system is working, but also how the male reproductive system is working too. I will share both of those videos with you now, but please bear with me. They are protected behind the Jigsaw paywall that we subscribe to, so I can't embed them in this presentation, but I can share another screen and I can show you what both these videos look like. They're very short, there's no sound, but you get a very clear idea of the scientific and factual approach that's being used by Jigsaw. Okay, hopefully your screen will have changed and you can see that I'm now looking at a menu of videos. So I'll show you the female reproductive system. There's an A and a B video. The only difference is that one has narrative text on it and one does not. I'll show you the one with narrative text now. So that's the resource that is used at the year 4 level. And you can imagine that would be part of a lesson. It would be being discussed by a teacher. They might watch it more than once, 2 or 3 times, discussing it, looking at the vocabulary that's used inside it. The vocabulary is challenging, but it is accurate. And we want children to have accurate vocabulary in this area of the curriculum. And there's also a male reproductive system body video as well, which I'll show you now. So hopefully what you can see from those 2 videos is that they would not be classed as sex education. They would be classed as health education, informing girls and boys about how their bodies change and those important processes. No mention has been made of conception or sex at this point. As we move forward into year 5, we look at some important things around sex education, such as self-image. And we work to understand the changes that puberty brings. So they'll recap their learning from year 4. This is the year where they will start to understand that sexual intercourse is what can lead to the conception of a baby. And incidentally, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to highlight in green the lesson that will be classed as sex education. So in theory, this is the lesson that parents could withdraw their children from, the one that focuses on conception. And at this level, there are 2 more videos. They are very similar to the ones that you've seen, but they go on a little bit further. So I'll switch back and I'll play those videos to you now. And you'll see that they just provide more information and more detail. Please bear with me 1 second. So now I'll play the female reproductive system video again, and you can see there's a difference. It's moved up a level to accommodate older children. Okay, and the male reproductive system video for year 5. So I'm hoping again that you can see that they are factual, they are informative, and they are hopefully very clear as well, and useful teaching resources. And moving on to year 6, that's the social and emotional learning intentions for year 5. Again, I've put a green box around the lesson that focuses on sex education. where children would review those videos that they have watched in year 5. They would also talk about pregnancy and how a baby grows inside the womb. And also there is content in this puzzle piece about self-esteem and attraction, feeling attracted to people around us. That would be more part of the relationships aspect. But you can see that one lesson there where students could potentially be withdrawn if it was felt that it wasn't appropriate for them to see those videos once again. As you can imagine, in year 7, term 3B, there are more lessons that are starting to talk in more detail about sex. So talking about changing body, recapping on learning that has gone before, having a baby, the impact of having a baby, what it does to your life, to your relationships, types of relationships that you might have and their impact, and changing feelings as well. So whilst there are no specific videos to go with these lessons, the videos that have been used in year 5 and 6 might be revisited if it's felt that there are gaps in some children's learning. There are also important aspects included in this part of the curriculum, talking to year 7 children about natural conception, but also acknowledging that babies can be conceived in other ways and that IVF is one of those methods. And then finally, moving into year 8, where children will learn about the negative impact of pornography. It's very, very likely, all the research suggests that they will have been exposed to pornography unwillingly or unwittingly, despite all the protections that school might put in place or parents put in place, that they'll be aware of this thing as a phenomenon. We feel like it's very important that we address it in the year 8 curriculum to ensure that children understand the negative impact it will have on them, and that they are aware of it as something to avoid, and also to help them understand their relationships with each other too. We also start to talk about alcohol and taking risks, because obviously we're talking about teenagers by year 8, and their assessment of risk is changing as their brains are changing and they're developing. It's very important that we open up a dialogue with them about managing that risk, understanding the dangers of alcohol. There's also a lesson, one lesson that occurs in the relationships puzzle piece, which is actually term 3A. So after the, so in that 5th term of school, that focuses on the concepts of sexual consent, sexual exploitation, abuse and grooming, coercion, being alive to the threat of these and spotting the telltale signs that this might be happening. And really important, that aspect of sexual consent, understanding how important it is that sexual relationships need to be consensual. And that takes us to the top of the prep. So we've taken you through from UI1 to the prep to give you an overview of the way the learning climbs the ladder, as it were. Just wanted to briefly show you some of the other resources, just to give you a flavor of the level that the lessons are pitched at. So for example, in our Changing Me topic, this is what younger children might be looking at and working with as they're learning that caterpillar and a butterfly are essentially the same animal, and starting to recognize the differences and the similarities between young animals and older animals. Very common that they would look at that life cycle of a frog as well, turning from frog spawn to tadpole to frog. As they get to year 3 and 6, this is some of the resources they might start using. So again, they're talking very factually about the way bodies change. They're using resources like this to discuss puberty, to label the parts of a body accurately. And they would do the same with men as well. Again, this is our health education, remember. They'll be looking at diagrams like this, helping them to understand the internal workings of the reproductive system in a man and labeling things effectively. Body changes for boys, and also inside body changes for girls as well. And when they do start to move on to conception and childbirth, year 5 and 6, these are the sort of pictures they might look at. The baby in the womb. We're talking about how the baby exists and survives in the womb, and how the baby leaves the womb, and how a woman's body might change as the baby gets bigger and bigger. We talked a little bit about the self-esteem and the body image resources that are covered as the children get older, and this is an example of one. It's understanding the impact of social media on mental health, the use of filters to change the appearance of people online, and the pressure that that can put on young people. And importantly, Jigsaw teaches about different families all the way from year 1. So at no point does Jigsaw say that a family is this and provide a definition of a family. So we might use a wide range of pictures to talk about relationships. We challenge the stereotypical view of families, and we encourage children to think about other types of family that are not represented. It could be a military family where the mother or father is away for a long time, adoptive families, and same gender families. They're just taught as many different examples of family types. And you can see here, when we start celebrating difference, that we accept relationships in all different shapes and forms. This is the puzzle piece that children are moving on to after the half-term break. One thing I thought I would like to share was just, for example, how Jigsaw teaches about inappropriate contact in year 2. So the lesson starts with a connectors tracing game, and children are tracing letters on each other's hands with their finger. That's normally how Jigsaw lessons start, with a connectors game to get them active and get their blood flowing. And then there's some paired work about touch and how it is used as a form of communication. And that might be in a good way, or it might be in a bad way. And then children are shown the PowerPoint where they talk about how we feel when we are touched, the kind of good touches and bad touches, a pat on the back, a punch in the arm. And teachers ask for strategies. If someone is experiencing a touch they don't like, what should they do? Then there's some individual work where children draw around their hand and write on their handshake what touches they like and what they don't like and why. So they're starting to take ownership of their bodies and own their personal space. And then teacher notes stress to follow safeguarding procedures if disclosures are made. There's always a possibility in these types of lessons. At ages 8 to 9, for example, children discuss what jealousy feels like and possible reasons for it. So we have scenario cards where children talk about practicing to manage conflict resolution, and there's a lot of drama involved and lots of putting yourself inside a situation to see how you would react. And I think from what I've seen and what I've experienced, that's one thing the children find most valuable. You get to test out your reactions in a safe space and to talk about those reactions afterwards. And that can be really, really useful because, as we all know, as we grow up and experience life and the many, many positives it has and the bumps that it can sometimes give us, actually those bumps are inevitable and we need as much help and support to prepare for them as possible. Another example, the boyfriends and girlfriends lesson in year 6, because again, it's when children are starting to talk about these things, and sometimes children in year 6 might feel like they've got a boyfriend or girlfriend. And as part of this lesson, for example, the children sort these cards into should or shouldn't do piles. We're talking about these relationships. What we don't do is say that no, you're not allowed, and no, you're not allowed to have it, and you are not old enough. Because we have to accept that children are changing, they're developing at different rates, and we have to acknowledge their feelings. But what we want them to do is make safe, informed decisions and to know where to go if they're experiencing anything that makes them feel uncomfortable at all. I have talked for a long time, and thank you so much for your patience. I really hope that what I've done is make clear the approach that we are proposing to use for relationships, sex, and health education here at DBS again. But I'll just restate, the lessons which focus on sex will not be taught until term 3B, with the exception of that one lesson in year 8 which slips in just before 3B. The resources will be shared again nearer the time to parents in each year group. So you'll hopefully have a meeting where you can speak either with the head of section or with the year group teachers, where they will show you all the resources. Parents of children in year 5 and year 6 and 7 and 8, where the sex education is taught, where I've identified it with that green square, parents will have the right to withdraw their children from these lessons if they wish. All you will need to do that is just to inform myself or the head of section to let us know, so that your child can then be removed from that lesson and they will go and do an alternative wellbeing activity with an adult. And as I'm sure you've seen, it's not many of the lessons when you actually look at the content. Lessons which focus on relationships and health are already being taught. They are threaded throughout the curriculum in Jigsaw. We're always talking about relationships in our wellbeing sessions, and actually a lot of the time outside of our lessons as well. We're helping children to relate to each other and relate to adults around them. And health is being taught already too. They are both statutory parts of our curriculum offering at DBS from EY1 all the way until year 8. In the meantime, what I would like to do is to invite any parents who are interested in this fundamental part of learning to join me in a working party. The purpose of this working party will be to work with the school to tailor these materials to best suit our students' needs. And what I'd really like to do is increase parental confidence in the resources that are being used in school, so that when we get nearer the time, we don't have too many withdrawals from these lessons. So when they are shared again, nearer the time, as I've said, they might look slightly different once our working party has had a chance to look in detail. And the way I see it working, our working party would meet in school, I hope, and I think what I'd probably do is have different meetings that focus on different year groups, different parts of the curriculum, although obviously that would depend on COVID and the size of the working party. But once I know what the interest level is like, I can make the next plans. And I've deliberately started it right at the beginning of the year to give us time to develop this approach and be very clear with everybody what steps we're taking. If you have any questions, you're welcome to ask them now. You can either pop it in the chat and I'll keep my eye on it, or you can put your hand up and you can share it with me now. I think Mr. Gabriel, I can see your hand up, I think.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Orton, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Excellent. So that seems very comprehensive, and there's not going to be a lot for the parents to explain, I would not think. They're probably going to have some questions. Does Jigsaw provide some guidance on the way that parents should be handling any questions that come up?
Yes, it does. That's a really good point, actually, that nearer the time I'll also be able to share that too, because it's very important that parents know what is being taught in school, but also get some guidance on how they should address when their children come home and say, oh, I learned about this today. As a parent myself, it's a very kind of, it often takes you off guard, and it's often when you're doing something that is just normally not great timing. But you're absolutely right. We will be sharing guidance with parents to help them to deal with those requests. The general rule from these resources, and one that I endorse, is that one of the most important things you can have with your child is an open line of communication. And that's a lot easier when they're younger, and as they get older and they have many more influences, what you really want to hope for is that that line of communication stays true. So we will be supporting parents to build that line of communication.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. I'm just checking the chat now because I think people might have. Yes, I will be sending this presentation later. What I will do is I will create a video of our meeting, and I will also share the slides as well. It might be more enjoyable to watch it at double speed. I don't know, but I do appreciate your patience. Has anyone else got any other questions? Yes, I can see another hand up. I think it's Mark S.
Good afternoon. I have a concerning question. Why would you decide it that you will start, sexual and health education at pre-PEP at EEY1? When I look at the Jigsaw website, it said that in England, this is a program that start off focusing on the school first, not the pre-PEP, and it is something that I feel personally that at the level of pre-PEP, it's quite early to be talking about like you know difference between boys and girl parts or whatever
Correct name of the body part.
the correct name of the body part, because these are very young children and they're not thinking about the private parts or anything like that. And this is also something that I think that is a responsibility of the parents as well, not of the school, to be taking full responsibility of like teaching, you know, in about this information to young children. And of course, the different family has different value on when they want to start teaching their young kids about these private things. So that was my concern, why you decided this has to start at pre-PEP.
Yeah, thank you for your question and for your concerns. I understand your point of view. I think what I'd like to clarify is that sex education does not start. It does not happen at all in the pre-prep. That comes later. But I think what you're explicitly talking about is the vocabulary used to describe body parts. And I completely understand your point of view about it. What I would say to you is perhaps something worth considering is that children do have names for their body parts at a young age, and often they are names given to them by parents to use. Then often not anatomically correct. They're seen as pet names or nicknames for their body parts. But children at that age are aware of their bodies, and it's important that they are able to refer to their body accurately to keep themselves safe, actually. One thing we'd like to do with the Jigsaw program is to remove the stigma around words like penis, vulva, and vagina, which when I was at school were naughty swear words that you should never say. And if you said it on the playground, you would get into trouble. Now, obviously, I'm not advocating that we would say this on the playground, because one of the things we do teach children is that there's an appropriate time to use that vocabulary and there's an inappropriate time to use it. So there's a lot of teaching that goes on around that. But the main thing we would like to do is for children to have an accurate way of describing their body parts. What the safeguarding research has shown from the UK is that children who can communicate things that are being done to them that make them feel uncomfortable in an accurate way, they are more able to disclose properly, and schools and adults are able to take action quicker. I do understand your point of view, and I mean, I'm going through exactly the same thing now. My children are getting older, and my own personal feeling as a father is I'm trying to keep them as young as possible, and it's breaking my heart every time they reach their next milestone. One of the things I think these resources do is they do give you pause to reflect and think, well, what is the right approach for my child, and what will keep them safest? The other thing I say to you as well is that keeping children healthy and teaching them about relationships is a statutory part of our UK curriculum. So schools in the UK, private and public schools, are all expected by law to keep their children safe by teaching them about health at the right times and teaching them about relationships too. So I'm hoping what you can see from the resources, so for example in EY1 and 2, is that they won't be talking about penis and vagina and vulva. They'll be talking about their knees and their heads and their arms. But gradually those words will, as they get older, year 1, year 2, they'll start to use those accurate words. And from what I've seen in the UK when I've taught this, and I've done this with schools, is that actually what happens very quickly is that children accept these terms. They don't laugh about them, they don't giggle about them, they see them as words in the same way as head and knee and chest are words. This removes a lot of the negative stigma from those body parts. It can remove shame as well, and actually encourages a much more open dialogue. It makes them safer, and it makes their sex education as they get older, it makes it more effective and much more likely to lead to positive relationships. But as I say, that is something I'd be happy to discuss in the working parties. And I do appreciate that different families have different beliefs, and obviously religious beliefs are also an important part of what we are considering with these resources. So thank you for your question. Yes, yes, Marcus.
So the content of each level that you just showed, it's just like the guideline, or it's just like okay, this is like the exact thing that you would like to teach the children in each year. Can it be changed, or maybe
It's
Sorry.
what my wife was saying, like, are these information and presentation you have shown, is it set on stone, or is it like going to be able to adapt in terms of what the parents' feedback would be?
It's yeah, it's certainly something that I want to take parental consideration into, which is why I'm forming the working parties. And in those parties, the way I see it working is we'd look at each year group and establish what was appropriate, and there would be changes that could be made. One of the things we obviously couldn't do within the time is we wouldn't be able to rewrite the curriculum and change it substantially. We would want to stay true to the fundamental approaches within Jigsaw. But you're absolutely right. These are the sorts of decisions and the sorts of discussions that can take place within a working party. What I don't want to do is to present these resources as set in stone and have half the parent population withdrawing from the lessons at the end of the year. That serves nobody any good. What I'd like to do is find a compromise where we can all agree that we've created something that is progressive, based on research, is safe, and that minimizes too many people feeling that they don't want their children to experience this education. As I say, we are led by the British curriculum in many areas. So we follow the statutory British curriculum. We do follow the guidance that comes from the UK as well in terms of what is statutory. And we do believe that health education is statutory and that children should be educated on how their body will change. This will keep them safer. It will protect their well-being. And if it's done properly by trusted adults at the right times, we think that it will, it's the best way forward for our children. That is something I'm certainly happy to talk about with parents and working parties. There's another hand up from Elle's mom or dad.
Hi, it's Al mom. So are you saying that this jigsaw system, you guys gonna start in term 3, which is you also want to make sure that every parent agree on the system and feel that they would like to help out the school by being volunteer and participate together with the school to make sure that the student understand the concept of the body changing and development. But what about now? Do you put any kind of knowledge about body changing and sexuality in any like curriculum, like science and all those stuff? Because my daughter, she's already come home every day, and some days she'll be talking about, oh, today my friend say this word, like a private spot, you know, and all those stuff, but she doesn't know what it means because we always monitor her when she watch a show or play game or whatsoever. We try to minimize or avoid all those words, you know, but then she learned it from school, from her classmate or her friend when she play in the playground, and she doesn't know the exact meaning, and she go and use it with other classmates, and it's turned out that another classmate that heard the word go to tell the class teacher or any teacher in the playground, but the teacher will tell my daughter that, oh, that's a very bad word, make sure you don't use it again and leave it as that. So that doesn't really like explaining it to her, you know, like why she cannot use that word or why she cannot say it to other people when her other friends say it to her, and then she go and use it to other student, which is, she said her teacher called her and tell her that make sure you never say this word again. But the teacher didn't explain to her why. And then that's when she has a big question mark in her mind. And then she came home and told me about it. And I was like, and this, the teacher explained to you what exactly it is. And she's like, no, but my other friend used it, but none of them get into trouble except me. So that I think there's a pro and con with this jigsaw puzzle thing. But I think the school really need to be clear and make sure that every parent go on the same page with you guys, because right now is it's 21st century, you know, they can just go on their tablet or cell phone and search something on Google, and then it could link them into so many things, which is sometimes the parent may not have time to sit there and monitor them everything, you know, and then they just remember that. And then they will go to school and they'll say, hey, you know, yesterday I watched this show, you know, and then they use this. And then so it's become like something that a group of friends think that is okay because the teacher never heard it, or none of any student ever report to the teacher, you know, oh, Al was saying this word, you know, and this is, I think this is not good, but she keep using it. And then the teacher will say, oh, Al, come here. This is a bad word. Don't use it again. And then leave it as that. So that's kind of not really like going with the system, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I can understand what you're saying. A couple of things there. I suppose the first one is I think it's great that Elle came and spoke to you. That's exactly what we want, is for her to know that the line of communication with home is strong. So that's good. I agree. One thing we're trying to do is change this approach within school, and that will involve training teachers. So during this year, we'll also be training teachers up in terms of how to run these sessions, but also what we say to children in those situations when a word has been used. And if it's a swear word, a word that is designed to intimidate or to denigrate someone, obviously it's completely inappropriate. But as the ethos changes, there should be a difference between those words, like the F word and the S word, and words that describe a human body accurately that a doctor might use. And I think you're right. We need to make sure that we have a common approach. I do want to involve parents as much as possible. I would love to have an approach where 100% of parents are happy. That would be the goal that we'd be aiming for. I think that would be difficult. I think this is such a it's an area where people have many different beliefs and many different ideas about what they'd like to do. My hope is to get as close as possible to what the majority feel is comfortable, and to address as many concerns as we can. I think it will be hard to satisfy everybody, but I'd be certainly welcome you to join the working party, and I'd be interested to hear more.
Well, I think it's very scary with the issue about sexuality and relationship and stuff. And just like I said, I think we are all parents. So every time our kids grow up and they change a new phase in their life, it's kind of scary because we all been there, done that. But I think maybe, I don't know, try to make it not too scary to the parent and the student and the teacher themselves too, you know, maybe I don't know, I saw Al sometimes she watched a YouTube channel, but it's like a doctor from UK and he has his own channel, but then he was like explaining like everything, you know, about body shame and all those stuff, but the way he do it is more like watching a movie or a show, you know, and there's no bad word or no vocabulary that I feel like I don't want her to watch it, you know, and that could be another approach that the school might be able to use it with the jigsaw system, you know, reduce the scariness of the word of sex and relationship and all those stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I take your point. Thank you. Okay. I will. I'm on my email, which you've got on the screen. If you want to email with me with any more questions, you're more than welcome to. Thank you again for attending. I really appreciate your time. I would welcome you to join the working party if you're interested in it, and I can tell you more about each year group. And yes, there's definitely opportunity to shape these resources and talk about what will make them the most successful that they can be at DBS. So many thanks for joining. Look out for my email where I'll have the video and the presentation as well. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you.